Hi, welcome to Mendel's First Law, the movie, starring me, your narrator, Gregor Mendel as himself, and this terrible green screen, also as itself. Now, if you're like me, you're dumb. But as we go along and learn about what the law of segregation is, then maybe, together, we can become a little less dumb. So let's learn. Anyway, our buddy Mendel is often considered to be the father of genetics, or, as I like to call him, the gene daddy. Now, to understand how he got that title, we'll have to look to his experimental work. In Mendel's age, it was understood that there was a clear genetic relationship between parents and offspring, but the mechanisms for how this occurred weren't entirely understood. Many thought that the offspring traits, or phenotypes, were like a mixture of parental traits, like what happens when you mix two different colors of paint. The problem with this hypothesis was that this wasn't always the case. For example, two parents with brown hair could have a child with blonde hair. Now, Mendel was a priest, but that didn't stop him from becoming a scientist. He took great interest in these genetic inconsistencies, and one day asked God, "Why do these flowers not always resemble their parents?" And God responded, "I don't know, Greg. Figure it out. Now stop calling me. I'm busy." So, Mendel did just that. For Mendel's experiments, he used the pea plant Pisum sativum because it was easy for controlling breeding, the generations were short, the offspring were plenty, and it had very simple phenotypes. The plants were often mixtures of only two phenotypic variants, such as tall versus short, purple flower versus white flower, green seed versus yellow seed, and so on. He called these units of inheritance, which today we know as genes. And genes for a specific phenotype are called alleles. Mendel created parental generations of true breeds. These true breeds consisted of lineages of the exact same phenotype. For example, if a true breed of yellow seeds mated or crossed with a true breed of yellow seeds, they would always produce a true breed of yellow seeds. The generation that comes after the parental generation is called the F1 generation, or first filial generation. The one that comes after that is the F2 generation, next is F3, and so on and so forth. Anyway, Mendel crossed a parental generation of yellow-seeded true breeds with a parental generation of green-seeded true breeds. Interestingly, he found that the F1 generation consisted of all yellow seeds. But when he crossed the F1 generation amongst itself, he found that the F2 generation consisted of a mixture of yellow and green seeds in a roughly 3-to-1 ratio. This means that the F1 generation still managed to carry the allele for green seeds, but because none of the F1 generation had green seeds, then the yellow allele must be dominant while the green is recessive. The reasoning for this is that each parent carries the same gene on homologous chromosomes. One comes from the mother and the other comes from the father. The chromosomes can carry the same allelic versions or different allelic versions. And while Mendel didn't understand this all at the time, he was still able to understand it conceptually by meticulously tracking and analyzing the data. To better make sense of this, we can rationalize the P1 yellow seeds to have two dominant alleles, as big Y and big Y, and the P1 green seeds to have two recessive alleles, as little y. When these are crossed, the F1 generation receives one of each type, giving it a genotype of big Y, little y. You could better make sense of this by visualizing an Punnett square, which gives every single possible combination in which these genotypes can be crossed. Now, when we cross two F1 plants with a genotype of big Y, little y, you'll find we get the following results: big Y, big Y, big Y, little y, big Y, and little y. And this actually explains the 3-to-1 ratio we saw earlier, since 3 of these options result in a yellow seed, while 1 results in a green. And this is what is known as the law of segregation, also known as Mendel's first law. The two alleles for each trait will separate from one another during gamete formation, and each allele will have an equal probability of inclusion in a gamete. Random union of gametes at fertilization will reunite one gamete from each parent to produce a progeny in ratios that are determined by chance. Upon further experimentation, Mendel also came up with his second law, the law of independent assortment. He published his findings for the scientific world, and his work was immediately recognized as groundbreaking. For this, he received the Nobel Prize and $10,000. God was proud of his discoveries too, and told him to invest in Bitcoin. Mendel listened and currently resides as the world's wealthiest priest. Wait, I'm sorry, I was just reading my fan fiction of the story. What actually happened is Mendel's work was entirely dismissed and he gave up on genetics, and later became a beekeeper. That part is actually true. It was only after his death when people realized the significance of his work, and it was this work that laid out the foundation for modern genetics to be built off of. It is unfortunate that he did not get the recognition he deserved, but that is why it's important to recognize him and many other scientists now. Without the gene daddy, there is no telling how primitive the field of genetics would be today. Anyway, be sure to check out my upcoming film, Mendel's Second Law, the other movie. Bye.